Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then in Genesis chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "Thus the heaven and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and rested on the seventh day from all the work which he hath made." In the teen class today, we were talking, and we talked about some of the things that we say as members of the Church of Christ. And we talked about in the book of John, where Jesus was speaking in parables, and he talked about that he was the gate, he was the good shepherd, and he was the only way to get to heaven. That it was only through him. And I asked him, I said, what does that mean when we say he is the only way? And they said, well, that means he's the only way. And I said, yes. I said, what does that mean to other people when we say he's the only way? I said, if you went to your friends at school and you said, I know the only way to get to heaven, how would that be received? And they said, oftentimes someone might say, well, you can't know that. Or you think you're the only one that knows. Or you're just a know-it-all. Or that's just rude and selfish to think that you're the only one that knows the way, the only way. And so, as we began to talk about that, we talked about why it is important that we understand that we do have information that the world may look at and say, well, that can't be right. And so today, I want to look at one of those examples. One that we probably don't get into a discussion with people very often about, but I think it's important. And what we're going to talk about, well, we're actually not going to talk about it, but I'm going to kind of go over it real quick. So if we were going to talk about this, we would be talking about how many days did it take for God to create the earth? I would say it takes 6 days for God to create the earth. Now, if I say that out loud to a group of people that are not gathered in this church, people would say, oh, 6 days? Come on, man. Don't you know science? Millions of years. How can you say 6 days? And then I'd say, well, look in Genesis chapter 1. And they say, well, maybe those days that they discussed in the Bible weren't literal 24-hour periods. Maybe they were long eons of time during which evolution could have taken place. And how long, can we really know how long the days of the creation week were really? Couldn't it be that the creation took 7 eons of time? And God, He's God. He just called them days to make it easier for people to understand. So when we look at this, if we were going to look at this, but we're not really, but we are for a second. If we were going to look at this, first of all, what does the day literally mean? In dictionary.com, so when we say there are 6 literal days, what does the word literal mean? Dictionary.com says literal means true to fact, not exaggerated, actual or factual, a literal, which is dictionary.com, but they use the word in the definition, which you're not supposed to be able to do, but who am I to argue with dictionary.com? A literal description of conditions actually to be such, without exaggeration or inaccuracy. Well then, what is a day? Well, we've been studying Israel and the fall of Israel and the Jewish people, but when the Bible was written in the Old Testament, it was written for the Jewish people. What did they call a day? That's what we should look at. Jews defined a day this way: a single rotation of the earth, evening and morning. Evening and morning is one day. If we were going to talk about 6 literal days, which we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on, but if we were, and if they were literally millions of years, we would just need to go back and look and say, how did the author use the word day? When he said God created the earth in 6 days, how did the author describe it? Well, first we could talk about how the author described the word day. It's a Hebrew word. It's called yom. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing it right. I'm not Hebrew, but that's what I'm going with. He used that specific word. And that specific word means an evening and a morning. Genesis chapter 1, verse 5, an evening and a morning. The exact rotation of the earth is described by this phrase, which was the common way for the Jews to describe a day. If you ask them 2,000 years ago, what is a day? They one time around, morning and night. Second, we could talk about that whenever a number comes before the word day in the Old Testament, in non-prophetical literature, it always meaning every time, it means a literal 24-hour period. So if the writers put a number in front of the word day, that means it's 24 hours every time. Third, you could talk about whenever the word day appears in the plural form, it always means literally one day. So we have the word that means 24 hours. Then if you put a number in front of it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it means, I'm doubling down on this, it's 24 hours. If I add an S behind it, like days, then in 6 days, it means not only number says 24 hours, word says 24 hours, plural says 24 hours. When God speaks in Exodus chapter 20, verse 11, he says, "For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth," there can be absolutely no doubt what that means. Fourth, we could talk about how the author of Genesis had other ways to indicate times, which were longer periods of time. He could have used a Hebrew word named dor, it's D-O-R, which means a longer period of time. But he didn't. Instead, he used the Hebrew word that meant 24 hours. When we look at the Bible and we say God doesn't put anything in the Bible that he doesn't think is important, God doesn't waste space in the Bible. God did not write the Bible like you and I wrote a paper in school, where we had to hit 1,000 words, so I added a lot of little fluff and everything just to hit my page limit or my numbers. God doesn't do that. Everything that God puts in the Bible is supposed to be there. So when we talk about, did God create the world in 6 literal days? He literally took every possible thing that he could point to that says, it's 24 hours. No, I'm serious, it's 24 hours. No, really, I did this in 24 hours. He put all of that in Genesis and Exodus to say, I created the world in 24 literal hours. But the question is, why is it important? Yeah, he created the world in 24 hours. Nah, he didn't create the world in 24 hours. It took millions of years. But God still created it. Why is it important? Let me tell you a story. There was once a donkey who was out walking. And while he was walking, he came across a tiger. And the donkey's walking along, as donkeys often do. They're a happy-go-lucky group. And the donkey's walking along, and he sees the tiger. And he says to the tiger, "Mr. Tiger, the grass is blue." And the tiger said, "No, the grass is green." And this started a heated discussion between the two. And it went something like this. "The grass is blue." "No, the grass is green." "The grass is blue, the grass is green, the grass is blue, 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 blue." "No, the grass is green, 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 green." Finally, the tiger grows tired of having this argument and says, "Fine, the grass is blue." As they were arguing, the king of the jungle walks by. And the lion looks at both of them and says, "What are you arguing about?" As they approach the lion, the donkey starts screaming, Your Highness, isn't it true? The grass is blue. Isn't it true? The grass is blue. The grass is blue. The grass is so blue. The tiger says the grass is blue. The tiger agrees with me. We both agree the grass is blue. And the lion looks at him and says, no, the grass is green. And the donkey says, no. The tiger agrees with me. We both agree the grass is blue. And then the lion looks at the tiger and says, the tiger will be punished with 3 days of silence. I don't want to hear a word out of your mouth. The donkey jumped for joy. Yeah, I knew the grass was blue, and ran off. The tiger asked the lion, Your Majesty, before you punish me, why? I didn't start it. The donkey was obviously wrong. I know the donkey was wrong. And the lion replied, you know and have seen that the grass is green. Yeah, so why are you punishing me? The lion said, it has nothing to do with the question of whether the grass is blue or green. The punishment is for a brave, intelligent creature like you to waste time arguing with the donkey when you know that it's wrong. And what's worse, eventually compromising what you know is right and changing who you are by giving into his lying ways. Of course the grass is green, but the donkey ignores the facts only to prove himself right. The biggest waste of time is in arguing with a fool and fanatic who doesn't care about the truth or reality, but just the victory of his beliefs. And if you do it long enough, reassuring yourself of the truth, you'll eventually give in and you'll become the donkey yourself. You know, the reason that 6 literal days is important, the reason that I can say that the only way you're getting to heaven is through Jesus Christ, is because I know that is the truth. And there are people who, for all the evidence presented to them, don't want to understand. There are people that have had something happen in their past that just want to pick a fight with you. There are people that have family or friends that they don't want to condemn or they don't want to have a discussion with, that will argue with you just for argument's sake. There are others who are blinded by ego, hatred, or resentment, and the only thing they want is to be right, even if they're not. So why are the literal 6 days of creation so important to us? Why is Christ and our devotion and our obedience to Him central to our faith so important? Because like the donkey, people will argue. People will ignore the facts and even lie to prove themselves right, or more importantly, to prove that someone else is wrong. It's always happened that way. Remember Eve and the devil in the garden? The devil knew he was wrong. He knew exactly what he was doing. He lied, he twisted the truth just to prove himself right to Eve. And more importantly, to ensure that Eve would be wrong. None of that's changed since back then. John chapter 8 and verse 44. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of the father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and not abode in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. Not only is the devil the father of lies, but even further, if he can convince you, despite all the evidence to the contrary, that creation didn't occur as it did in the Bible, If he can, yeah, I don't want to have that argument. Yeah, whatever. Believe what you want. As long as you believe that God created it, it could be 1,000,000 years. It could be 6 days. It could be 30 minutes. I don't care. But if the devil can convince you to let go of that, if he can convince you that it was millions of years, or maybe God really didn't even have a part in it. He just kind of started the whole process and then kind of stepped away. If they can convince you of that, then what they're saying is they're right and God's wrong. They want to prove, really what it comes down to, is people want to prove that either God doesn't exist or God's moved away. And he doesn't care really about what you do or how you do it. And without a God, they become their own God. And they can do what they want, and you can do what you want, and I can do what I want. There are plenty of donkeys in the world today that say the grass is blue. They just say it in a different way. They say, well, God didn't create the world in 6 literal days. Don't be silly. Be silly. That's not that important. They say, you know what? God doesn't really even pay attention to you. The grass is blue. But in Genesis chapter 16, verse 13, it says, and she called the name of the Lord, and he spake unto her. Thou, God, seest me, for she said, have I also here looked after him and seeth me? God sees you. But the world says, God's not paying attention to you. Don't worry about it. The world says, the grass is blue. God doesn't really listen to you. God says, the grass is green. 1 John chapter 5, verse 14, and this in confidence that we have in him, that if we ask according to his will, he heareth us. They say, God doesn't know you. The grass is blue. Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5, before I formed thee in thy belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto all nations. They'll say, God doesn't really care about you. I mean, he's God. Just you. He doesn't care. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6, humble thyselves therefore under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting your cares upon him, for he cares for you. And the worst one of all is they'll say, God doesn't love you. You're just kind of out here. John chapter 3, verse 16 says, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. For who? For you. For me. Romans chapter 5, verse 8, but God commended his love toward us, and while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. You see, it's those little things that the world tells us. Someone walks up to you today and says, the grass is blue. You're probably going to go, you're crazy. I need to leave. But spiritually, every day, people come up to us and say, the grass is blue. God doesn't care what you do. There's 100 ways to get to heaven. Just pick the one that you like. You don't have to repent. You're constantly cleansed for whatever you want to do. God didn't create the world in 6 literal days. He did it in millions of years. All those little things chip away. And if you don't think Satan's behind each and every one of those, you're just silly. Because eventually, if we listen to that long enough, then we lose who we are and what makes us who we are. And that is God. And if we remove God and the wonderful things that He does for us and provides for us in our lives, then we're donkeys. That's the way it is. So hold on to the faith. Hold on to the things that you know are true, and no matter who tells you that it doesn't matter, that it's not true, if you find it in the Word of God, it is true and it is supposed to be there. Romans chapter 8 and verse 31. What shall we say then to these things? When the world says the grass is blue, we look at them and tell them, no, the grass is green. And if God be for us, who can be against us? If we can help you, please come forward as we stand and sing.